Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today's video is a complete start to finish detail on this white 2015 Renault Clio RS. Now, just like most of the recent videos I've been doing, this detail isn't solely based on restoring this car back to its former glory, but it's also largely focused on testing detailing products and techniques, where I'm trying to share these experiences and findings with you guys in the hope that these videos will be a good source of information for the detailing community and also provide myself with some useful information that can continuously help me improve in my profession and passion, which is automotive detailing. And although these product and technique testing details do take a bit more time to complete, the real-world information they've been providing me over the last few years has really proven to be an invaluable source of information that is well worth the extra time, cost and effort needed. Now, this 3-year-old Clio RS has been recently purchased by its owner, and as you'll see more clearly once the car is decontaminated and inspected under lights, the paint is quite bad to say the least. And you may have guessed by the title of this video that this little French car has extremely hard paint, which together with the quite severe defects is going to make for quite a, let's say, interesting detail. But I'll get more into that once we get to polishing in the correction stage. So as always, the wheels are the first area to be addressed. This is primarily done because I don't want any standing water sitting on the car while I clean the wheels. So if I start with the rims, then I don't need to worry about water spots being generated on the paint as the water dries while I'm cleaning the wheels. I'll also add that these rims are severely scratched up and also badly touched up with paint. But as the owner has already decided to replace the rims, I'll just be giving them a nice deep clean and not worrying about correcting or protecting them. So as per my usual technique, Purge wheel cleaner was applied to the rims, given a couple of minutes to start breaking down the brake dust and road grime, and then pressure rinse down. Next, the tyres and wheel wells were treated with the prototype wheel cleaner product I've been testing lately and you may have seen in a couple of my past videos. I'll also add that this is another product that is hopefully getting close to being released, as it just seems to work so well, but I'll let you guys know when that actually happens. Then, as you can see in the footage and text, a variety of tyre and rim cleaning brushes and mitts were used to give the wheels a much needed deep and thorough clean. I'll also add that I've covered this wheel cleaning process in much greater depth in a few of my past videos, also discussing Purge and the prototype wheel and tyre cleaners in greater length, if you do wish to get some more information about these products and techniques. Now, as you would have seen in the opening footage and inspection of the vehicle, this car is quite dirty and in need of a thorough deep clean to remove the accumulation of dirt, mud and road grime before we get to the next decontamination stage. Snow Plus intensive car wash detergent was used at a 1:10 dilution ratio in my foam lance to give the vehicle a pre-soak foam in order to soften the grime and begin breaking down the first layer of dirt. After about 5 minutes of allowing Snow Plus to dwell, this was followed up by an extremely thorough top to bottom pressure rinse down of the entire vehicle, ensuring that every square inch of the car was treated with the high pressure water beam to remove as much of the looser dirt and grime as possible before the next hand wash stage. It's important to understand that the more dirt you remove in this touchless pre-hand wash stage, the far safer and less likely you are to scratch the paint in the next hand wash stage. So onto the hand wash stage. Snow Plus was used in the wash bucket at a 1 to 200 ratio or 50 ml to 10 litres of water. Then following a basic 2-bucket wash method, the entire car was given a top to bottom hand wash using the CLOUDBURST microfiber mitt, ensuring to rinse the mitt thoroughly after each panel in the second rinse bucket before moving on to the next panel. I just want to add that regardless of how bad the dirt or grime is, it's best to always use only light pressure with straight back and forth motions. If the paint requires it, just rinse your mitt out and go over it a second or third time, rather than using more aggressive pressure to try and get it off in one go, which will greatly increase the likelihood of you further scratching the paint. Another pressure rinse down, and it was time for the chemical and mechanical decontamination stages. Many of you guys may know that I have adopted using PURIFY to remove the more stubborn environmental fallout and bonded particles. Now in the past, I would have started by using an iron and tar removal chemicals, and then move on to using a clay bar or mitt with additional clay lubricants to both address the chemical and mechanical decontamination stages. The benefit of PURIFY is that it combines your iron and traffic film removers as well as your clay lubricant all into one product and procedure. So it's far more cost effective, far quicker and just as capable. I'll also add that a few of you guys have asked me about this clay mitt I've been using, which has actually been released as the Waxit clay mitt. And as I've stated in past videos, it's perhaps the safest yet extremely effective clay mitt I've ever used. Now the truth is that when you look at this mitt compared to others, the surface looks almost identical, just as when you compare most traditional clay bars that all seem to look and feel the same. But as I'm sure most of you guys will know, there's a lot of difference between the cheap and nasty clay bars found on eBay compared to the more expensive ones from reputable brands. And in my experience, the same goes for clay mitts, towels or foam blocks. So although they may look the same, the results they achieve and the levels of scratches and marring they produce can actually vary quite a lot. Once all the paint and glass was treated with PURIFY and the clay mitt, all the panels and trims were pressure rinsed down, and the car was then blown dry with the use of warm compressed air in the form of a METROVAC blaster. Now, apart from removing the more obvious standing water, it's important to ensure that all the remaining trapped water in the finer seams and crevices is entirely blown out and removed, as even a few drops of remaining water will cause issues when you're trying to mask your rubber and plastic trims. Plus, it's also a way of removing any trapped or standing wash or decontamination product residue that can certainly get trapped in certain finer areas. A final IPA wipe down of the entire vehicle was then performed in preparation for the paint correction stage. This is really another vital step to ensure that any remaining residue left on the paint that will cause issues in the correction stage is removed with an alcohol-based cleaner that leaves no residue of its own behind. Now, I'm going to start by saying that the footage, or what the camera was able to capture, really didn't do justice to display just how bad this paint really was. And the disturbing thing about it is that the car is only just over 2 years old, with very low kilometers. Now add the fact that you'll see quite shortly, this paint is truly rock hard. So it brings up the question as to what was done to inflict such damage on such a hard and scratch resistant paint in such a short period. The consistent swirl-like marks that are covering the entire paint really aren't your typical rounded spider web pattern swirls, but are definitely much deeper with more straight line scratches that are positioned in a circular pattern, which in my experience is the kind of defect that's produced by car wash brushes, both manual and handheld, and the automatic drive-thrus. But still, I have to say that some areas look like the paint and glass was scrubbed with a Scotch-Brite scourer. Now being white paint, these defects just don't visually jump out as they would in darker paints. But I guarantee you that if this car was black, it would look like a right mess. And no dealership would be able to get away from selling a car with this shockingly bad paint on any colour other than white. Looking at the gloss or finish of the paint, which is actually much better than it should be, as these types of defects with this white paint should look a lot more dull and muted than it is, I can clearly see that this paint has been recently polished with quite an aggressive method, as there's rotary induced holograms all over the car, and a lack of environmental fallout on the paint, together with the level of gloss in the finish, which all suggest that someone has made an attempt quite recently to correct this paint. However, although the gloss to some degree was restored to the finish, the defects have not been addressed whatsoever. And with the wax or sealants filling agent that was used to try and hide the severe defects now removed, the paint is looking so much worse in its true and bare state. Masking tape was then used to cover the rubber and plastic trims to both protect those trims and the polishes from picking up unwanted residue. A few dozen paint readings were then taken to measure the overall thickness of the paint, which was actually quite good, averaging about 150 microns or 6 mils, and also reasonably consistent throughout the entire car, which suggests that the paint is all original. However, with a variance of about 50 microns or 2 mils from the lowest reading to the highest reading, it does also suggest that some areas of this car have been previously aggressively corrected in some form or another. So onto the paint correction testing phase. To start with, my first combination was CONCOURS Precision Compound on the Lake Country Blue H2O foam pad using the ShineMate EX605 dual action polisher. Now if this paint wasn't as bad as it is, I would have started with a less aggressive compound and pad selection. But as the paint is pretty shocking and what I did initially guess would be a harder paint, then this combination, based on my experience, is a good start to help me decipher what it's going to take to restore it. Apart from assessing the actual results, it's important to use your test sections as a means of determining what the paint is like. Even though a certain combination may not be the best, it should still give you valuable information of what you're dealing with and how to proceed forward. So firstly, looking at the finish, I can see that it's been improved in the way of gloss, depth and clarity, and the fact that I'm using a cutting compound and cutting pad, yet still able to improve the finish without any haze or micro marring, tells me that this is to some degree a harder and scratch resistant paint that's going to be fairly easygoing in relation to finishing down flawlessly. Secondly, looking at the defect removal I was able to achieve, it's actually almost as if nothing has happened. the defects are really unchanged, with perhaps a 10% improvement at best. But really nothing significant enough to suggest that this combination is going to be able to correct this paint. Now, taking these two factors of how the finish is improved, but the defects are almost unchanged, with a relatively aggressive compound and pad selection, it's quite safe to say that this paint is extremely hard, and a more aggressive approach is required. The second test section was with SCHOLL Concepts S3 Gold using the same Lake Country pad. Now, this isn't what I'd normally use after seeing the results from the first section, but as a few of you guys have been asking me to show this compound in my videos, I decided to use it in the next section. S3 Gold is a compound I've actually used quite a lot, and it is without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the best compounds on the market. The truth is that before I tried Precision, S3 Gold was my Precision or go-to compound with foam pads. I'd even give it a slight edge in its user friendliness over Precision, but the truth is that although they are both fantastic compounds, I just seem to personally achieve a touch more cut and slightly better finish with Precision over S3 Gold on most occasions. Having a look at the results on this paint, they really are just so similar to the previous section in the cut and finish both of these compounds have been able to achieve. The next section was with the last cut compounding glaze using the Lake Country fibre cutting pad. Now, based on the previous sections, this combination is a good progression, which is more based on the microfiber cutting pad, which should prove to be more capable at dealing with these defects on this harder paint. Now, one thing I did want to add about the last cut compounding glaze is that there's no doubt that it cuts extremely well, but it's really not so much about it being an overly aggressive compound as it is about it being a masterpiece of a compound with microfiber pads. In reality, there are more aggressive compounds out there, but when you use most of them with microfiber, they just don't work anywhere near as well. You need to appreciate that a test section isn't always going to translate into the results that compounding a whole car will reveal. And the reason that I just love this compound so much is that it works consistently from start to finish throughout the whole car. Whereas many other compounds might show great results in your test section, but as you continue to correct the paint, you'll find that the microfiber pads start to become overly hot, begin to dust, clog up quickly and rapidly diminish their ability to both cut and finish as they were in your test section. Now, looking at the results, I can see a noticeable difference in both the cut and finish of this section. However, although it is hard to clearly see the results on camera, the defect removal is still far from satisfactory, with perhaps a 20 to 25% improvement, which is much better than the previous sections, but still far from great. Now, the lighter swirls have actually been mostly removed, but it also reveals more clearly the deeper, consistent scratches beneath that look like they're going to be seriously difficult to eliminate. Another compound that works extremely well with microfiber pads, and is actually the first compound I had great success with on these pads, was POLISHANGEL's Master Compound. This is, in my experience, the most user-friendly compound out on the market that truly doesn't dust, provides the easiest wipe off and the longest polishing cycle of any compound I've ever used. Now, it does come at a premium, as it's also one of the most expensive compounds on the market, and honestly, before I tried the last cut, this was my go-to microfiber compound. Looking at the results in the last two sections, they are both extremely similar with almost identical levels of cut and quality of finish. But I do see a slightly increased level of defect removal with the last cut, whereas the finish, not perfect, is equally good with both compounds. The last combination in this testing phase was with CARPRO CLEARCUT, starting with the Lake Country Blue H2O foam pad. One thing with CLEARCUT that should help you get the most out of this compound is to use a little more product than you normally apply, as in my experience it does help increase this compound's cutting ability, which overall is quite impressive and another of my absolute favourite compounds. Technique also plays a large part in achieving CLEARCUT's fantastic results. Its abrasives tend to diminish quite quickly, so you'll find that you actually get more cut with this compound if you start on a slower machine speed with just light pressure and then increase both your pressure and machine speed to achieve the best possible finish. Now, assessing the results, it was plain to see that this combination was a step down to the previous sections in relation to defect removal. And it's really more about the pad selection rather than the compound that's creating the most defect removal. As a direct comparison, I tried CLEARCUT once again, but this time with the Lake Country fibre cutting pad. As you'll hopefully see, the cut was greatly improved, but also very similar to the previous two sections with the microfiber pads. Overall, in this particular test, on this paint and defects, I'm still seeing a slightly greater defect removal with the last cut. Also, I know many people do focus on particular products much more than they do on technique. So just to give you guys an example on how important technique really is with certain compounds, a great example is comparing master compound to CLEARCUT, which are actually extreme opposites in their chemistry and do need to be used with very different techniques if you want to get the most out of them. Whereas master compound greatly benefits from using longer polishing cycles with increased pressure and machine speed to start with, and slower speeds and less pressure to finish with, CLEARCUT is almost the complete opposite, where there's no real benefit to polishing beyond 3 or 4 passes, and light pressure and speed to begin with, followed by more pressure and speed to end with, renders the best results. But then you have a compound like the last cut that actually doesn't mind longer or shorter polishing cycles and tends to conform and adapt to your personal technique rather than you having to conform to the compound's preferences. Now ultimately, the great equalizer is always the paint, and that's where your ability to judge your results and determine the best products and techniques is the true deciding factor. With all that said, I'm going to move forward with the last cut on this particular testing panel to try and determine just how many passes and how much work it's going to take to achieve at least 95% or greater defect removal, which on this particular paint and defects is still going to be a massive turnaround while still being realistic considering the time and cost restraints that are unfortunately a part of every job. As I've discussed in past videos, a great method to actually increase your cutting ability with any compound and pad is to simply work smaller sections. And although that does mean that you need to do more sections, you'll still find that it works out to be a quicker process in the long run when you are struggling to achieve the amount of cut you're getting. Another tip is to try and understand that all these compounds I'm using contain diminishing abrasives. So about 80% of the cut actually happens in the first 2 or 3 row passes of your machine. And after that, all you're really doing is refining the finish. So when you're doing multiple sets of passes in the same section, it's far more efficient to stick to just 2 or 3 passes per set until the final set, which will save you time, minimize heat, whilst being a far more effective method. So after completing the compounding stage on this bonnet, it's still looking like it's going to take at least 4, if not more sets of passes per section, even when working smaller areas, which is a true testament to just how ridiculously hard this paint with the severe defects in place really is. Saying this paint is hard is like saying it's difficult to reach the summit of Mount Everest, which are both gross understatements to say the least. As you'll see further on, I did get through this job by adjusting my techniques, products, tools and methods. And lastly on this point, I've actually corrected a lot of cars with extremely hard paint, including Volvos, BMWs, Mercedes, Audis and Volkswagens. But this paint will be permanently etched into my brain as the hardest paint I've ever come across. So part of this detail and the first testing phase is answering questions like, what if these are the only compounds, pads and machines I have to work with? Which honestly is already a pretty decent selection. The answer in reality, even when considering other options, such as sanding, rotary polishes, and more aggressive compounds and pads, is that there's just no getting around that it's going to take a lot of work to restore this paint no matter which avenue you decide to take. Yes, some options will be more time efficient than others, but there's no quick fix method if you truly want to restore this paint to a high standard, or really even just a decent standard. On the subject of sanding car paint, I've been seeing more and more posts in detailing groups where people who honestly don't seem to have much experience, if any, with that process, are still recommending it to others, suggesting that they should sand the entire car, as it will be faster and safer to remove the defects. I just want to quickly address this point from the point of view of someone who has sanded cars before, and try to explain that although sanding can be technically safer, and it can also be technically quicker, in most cases, unless you are well versed in this area, I would strongly suggest you don't pursue that avenue. You need to understand that what is technically true and what is true in the real world can be two extremely different things. I've no doubt that there are plenty of body shop professionals and certain detailers that are well advanced in this area. But for me personally, sanding an entire car, which includes all the panels containing sharp curves, panel creases and thin edges found on all modern cars, is a lengthy process that takes weeks, not days to complete, unless you are a true master in that area, or unless the quality of work you are producing is perhaps subpar. One final point on this topic is that hard paints are still hard when you sand them, so you need to appreciate that the sanding process on a paint such as this is still going to require a lot of work. Starting with the more aggressive coarse grits and then refining them down, which usually takes much longer than the first stage, and you then have to start compounding and polishing, which I'll try to explain once again. On a paint this hard is not going to be a quick and easy process, as even light sanding marks on this particular paint type are still a lot of work to refine. In the end, there are options to consider, but if you think for one moment that sanding an entire car in this condition with this paint type is going to somehow be a much easier process, you're grossly mistaken. It can actually be a way of creating an amazing show car finish, but trust me when I say that it won't be quick or easy. So with the bonnet completely compounded, it was time to refine the finish. The first combination I tried was CONCOURS Finesse on the Lake Country Orange H2O foam pad. Finesse is a great compound, especially in this circumstance where the paint is so hard and a polish with a little more bite is needed to make enough impact to refine the paint. The second combination was with CONCOURS Morph on the same Lake Country pad. I basically decided to use Morph mostly for the fact that it's another product I've been asked to show in my videos. Honestly, Morph is a brilliant all-in-one polish that can be used as a primer base coat for certain ceramic or glass coatings. I actually really like it for certain jobs, such as one-stage corrections, pre-sale details, and for working on super soft paints, where Morph will harden after a couple of hours to reduce the chance of scratching the paint when the coating is applied. In this case, however, I'm going to be using a new prototype spray coating as the paint protection product that actually needs to be applied to bare paint. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to talk a little more about Morph and show it in action. The third test section was with Polish Angel's Master Final Polish on the black Lake Country H2O foam pad. Overall, I wouldn't expect this combination to be the best choice in this circumstance, as Master Final Polish is quite a fine and gentle polish, as is the black H2O pad, which on a paint such as this, it'll most likely struggle to make any sort of impact. But again, a lot of what I'm trying to display in these videos is showing a variety of combinations and helping to explain why some are more successful than others in particular circumstances. Having a look at all three sections, I would actually say that the section with Morph is the best in relation to finish and gloss. But you need to appreciate that Morph's filling ability and sealant-like finish is what's really producing it. But just as I suspected, the combination with finesse is almost as good, and far better than the last section with master final polish that, although it is one of my favourite combinations for mid to soft paints, it's really just not aggressive enough to refine this much harder paint. The bonnet was then finished using finesse with the orange H2O foam pad. But I'll also add that it did actually require a second set of passes to completely eliminate the compounding haze, which then led me to believe that even a more slightly aggressive combination could be a faster solution, which we'll look at in the next stage of testing. So in the second phase of testing, I decided to try a more aggressive approach, using my rotary polisher with the HD wool cutting pads and also testing a few compounds starting with the Angel Wax Resurrection. Now overall, I found Resurrection to be quite an aggressive compound, but as I've explained and displayed in past videos, I don't believe it to be a great combination with microfiber pads, due to the inconsistent results it seems to produce. However, I've had great success with Resurrection on wool pads and found it to be a much better suited material for this compound. Another topic I wanted to address is rotary polishing. Now, a rotary can certainly be a more effective tool for heavy compounding, but you need to appreciate that it's no magical solution to this extremely hard and damaged paint. Yes, it can, with proper technique and knowledge, be a quicker way to level the defects on this paint, but it's not going to somehow turn this difficult job into an easy one. So overall, by using this new combination and changing my polisher pad and compound, as well as my technique, there has been an increased leveling ability with this different approach. But I want to help explain that it's not a massive difference, and technique is still the biggest factor in achieving this increased cutting ability. The truth is that in my experience, microfiber cuts better than wool, but the issue is that microfiber doesn't work well with rotary polishers, especially with larger pads, as the machines become more difficult to control, and even more so, the results are inconsistent and the heat generation is dangerously high. In effect, a large throw dual action polisher with a microfiber pad and all things equal can actually cut more than a rotary polisher with wool. The real difference is that if you change up a few things on your rotary polisher that you can't simply do with a dual action polisher, that's when you can generate more cut with a rotary. So what are those things that can create more cut with a rotary? Firstly is pad size. I've switched from a 5-inch backing plate to a 6-inch, and the pad I'm actually using is a 7-inch pad, which I've also explained in past videos that the outer diameter of every pad is where the vast majority of cut is achieved regardless of the polisher. So the larger the pad means the more cut. Now with dual action polishers, you're limited to 6-inch backing plates, but on rotaries, depending on the one you have, you can step up to 7, 8 and 9-inch plates and pads. The other large factor is speed. Although DA polishers oscillate quite quickly, they can't match the rotation speed of a single action rotary. And although for the most part, you really don't want to crank up your rotary to top speed, as it will generate excess heat and increase marring, with the proper understanding and technique, using high speeds can actually work extremely well. But at the same time, you need to alter your technique to deal with this increased speed. So things like shorter working cycles and speeding up your arm movement need to all coincide with that increased speed. Thirdly is pressure. Although you can apply pressure to a DA polisher, you'll find that it also slows the machine's rotation speed. So in effect, you're limiting the cut due to the reduced rotation as you apply more pressure. However, unless you have a cheaper or underpowered rotary, the rotation speed won't be affected no matter how much pressure you apply. In the end, all these techniques and methods, together with a few others, is what's really going to influence the amount of cut you're able to achieve with a rotary polisher that for the most part don't really translate through to DA polishers, which are less technique dependent machines. So overall, this combination in technique is still taking about 3 to 4 sets of passes to eliminate the defects, as opposed to 4 or 5 passes with the previous combination on the bonnet. However, the increased marring caused by the rotary polisher and wool pad is actually taking more time to refine the finish, even when stepping up to a more aggressive combination in the final stage. As a whole, it's still a slightly quicker approach, but taking into consideration that this is easily a week-long job, it's actually still going to equate to saving a few hours of work during this whole paint correction process. For the other side of the roof, I decided to compare a few more compounds to see if I could increase my productivity any further, starting with the RUPES rotary coarse compound. Now, I've tested this compound in a few of my past videos with good results, but the main issues I had with it when using it with dual action polishers have actually been amplified since I've been testing it on my rotary. I've actually found it extremely difficult to eliminate the compound splatter even after changing my technique and lowering my speeds. The other issue is still the wipe off, that although it's an easy and smooth wipe down, there's still a thin greasy layer of residue that's just too much work to remove and requires multiple IPA wipe downs to completely get it off the paint. As far as results goes, it actually worked pretty well. I'd even say the finish was a touch better than Resurrection, but the cut was a slight step down. But regardless of those things, this compound was just slowing me down due to the user experience of the splatter and product wipe off. The second compound was Detailing Kingdom's Vision. Now, from a user experience, this compound couldn't have been more different. It was an absolute pleasure to use with zero splatter and next to no dusting with a nice, easy, no fuss wipe off. It was also actually able to finish down impressively, but as far as defect removal goes, it was a step down compared to both Resurrection and the RUPES coarse compound. Next was MENZERNA's Super Heavy Cut 300. Now, the only real issue I had with it from a user experience point of view was the increased dusting that seemed to progress and increase with each set of passes. Apart from that, any splatter was quite minimal and the wipe off was also quite reasonable. In relation to cut, it was perhaps the next best section after Resurrection, but the finish is where it really fell short with increased haze, holograms and marring compared to the other compounds. The last test was 3D's 501. I'd say from a user-friendly perspective, it sat somewhere in the middle, with slight dusting but nothing overly bad, as was the wipe off and really not much product splatter at all. However, in relation to results, this is where it really shined. I was actually really impressed with the cut, which proved to be the best so far, and the finish was actually again quite good. I decided to finish the whole side of the roof with 501, and in the end it actually seemed to be the quickest and most effective compound with the rotary and wool pad. For the edge work, I did still use the ShineMate Mini DA polisher with the last cut and microfiber pad, and the finish was then refined using finesse polish with the Lake Country HCO blue foam pads. Now, the largest issue I was having at this stage was refining the finish, which even after stepping up to a more aggressive combination in the second stage was still proving to be difficult and time consuming. So in this final testing phase where I used half of the door, I wanted to explain why a 3-stage correction process is sometimes necessary and a better solution. Now, although the combination of the rotary polisher together with 3D 501 had proven to be a quicker defect leveling process, the aggressiveness of this combination was leaving quite a bit of compounding marring behind, that just a single follow-up finishing stage was proving to be a struggle to refine. So in this particular case, starting with the wool pad and the rotary as the first primary cutting stage, and then using the microfiber pad on the larger throw DA polisher as the second refining stage was actually a quicker overall process. That then made the third and final finishing stage a quick and easy step with the smaller ShineMate polisher and foam pad, which also produced the best finish. So even though I added an extra step to the paint correction process, it allowed the previous 2 stages to be shorter and quicker steps. And apart from having a few additional benefits, such as being a little quicker and reducing the heat with less overall aggression, the finish itself was actually the best one so far. So to sum up the testing phases, which I do really hope were useful pieces of information, the real lesson of the day is that some harder paints that have been abused are just a nightmare to work with, no matter how you look at it and decide to proceed. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have options, and that you can't improve the situation by using some alternative techniques, products and tools. The rest of the car was completed using the same basic 3-stage process, but with some slight variations to address the more particular trims and alternative surfaces that each and every specific car contains. The only soft paint I came across on this car was the piano black plastic trims found on the car door pillars, side view mirrors and some parts of the bumpers, which was actually a nice break from the rest of the car's hard paint. Although these black trims were badly scratched, a couple of set passes with precision compound on the blue HCO foam pads, followed by a single finishing pass with finesse polish on the black HCO pad, was enough to restore them back to an almost perfect condition, which was basically due to the softness of the paint on these panels, which didn't really require anything more aggressive. Once the correction stage was completed, compressed air was used to blow off any remaining dust, and a final IPA wipe down using Clarity was performed to prepare the car for the next protection stage. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using a new prototype hybrid spray coating as the paint protection product on this Clio RS. This product really falls into a category that sits in between a ceramic or glass coating and your more standard paint sealant. This really is a category that has been building up a lot of momentum over the last year, as in general a product such as this is estimated to have a durability of about 12 to 18 months, yet still be quite easy to apply for those people who are a little apprehensive about using a true nano coating but still want longer lasting and increased protection over a standard wax or sealant. Now, as far as application goes, it's really the same as almost any spray sealant on the market, in that you need to be applying it to well prepared, clean and bare paint. And just on a side note, I do know that some people have been struggling with applying spray sealants such as CARPRO Reload and Nova Jet. In my experience, about 90% of these issues occur because the paint isn't adequately decontaminated, or the paint really does need to be polished or corrected. You will struggle in applying any paint protection product if the paint isn't properly prepared. And that's the very issue that almost all people have with spray sealants and coatings in my experience. The other 10% of issues tend to be things like applying too much product, working areas that are too large, waiting too long to wipe it down, or working in the sun or hot panels. The only real difference with a hybrid coating such as this, compared to a spray sealant, is that it's going to feel a little more grippy as you level it down. But compared to a true nano coating, which for me personally takes about 2 hours to correctly apply, a hybrid coating such as this should really take no more than about 45 minutes to coat the entire car, which also includes all the glass and trims. And the other benefit is that there's really no guesswork in knowing when to wipe it down, as it's a wipe on and immediately wipe off procedure with no waiting for flashing or curing times. In the end, and on a more personal level, this really was one heck of a detail. I'll hopefully have an update video on this car soon, having a look at it during the first wash after the correction and protection detail. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for these videos, and I'll see you soon.